I'll just say one thing, get ready for what's coming, because Idaho is far more surprising and way crazier than you might think. And by the time we get to the final facts, you'll understand exactly what I mean. 50. Idaho's deepest lake is deeper than most skyscrapers. Lake Pend Oreille is Idaho's deepest lake, plunging to around 1,150 feet. That's deeper than many major buildings are tall, giving it a dramatic scale that few visitors expect. The lake was shaped by massive glacial forces, and you can still see the evidence in its steep underwater walls and sharply carved shoreline. What makes this even more striking is the lake's surface area, which stretches broad and calm, hiding the depth beneath. Naval research has been conducted here due to its unique acoustic qualities, which makes the lake even more intriguing from a geographical standpoint. 49. Idaho contains one of the largest unbroken wilderness areas in the lower. The Frank Churchill River of No Return Wilderness covers roughly 2.3 million acres, making it one of the largest protected wilderness regions outside Alaska. Its size is comparable to some small countries. Geographically, it includes plunging river corridors, broad plateaus, steep mountain ridges, and dense forests. What makes it especially notable is that this entire area remains largely roadless, giving geographers a rare look at landscapes that have evolved without extensive human intervention. It is a monumental span of rugged, intact terrain. 48. The state has more river miles than any other in the lower 48. Idaho contains more than 100,000 miles of rivers and streams, an astonishing number that surprises even seasoned travelers. The reason lies in its extensive network of mountains, snow-fed basins, and interconnected watersheds. The Snake River alone spreads its influence across southern Idaho, carving canyons, powering agriculture, and shaping valley floors. In the north, interconnected river systems form vast hydrological networks that help support the state's rich biodiversity. It is effectively a water kingdom disguised as a rugged frontier. 47. Idaho hosts the largest concentration of natural hot springs in the United States. While several western states are known for hot springs, Idaho's count is unmatched, with hundreds of naturally heated pools scattered across the mountains and valleys. This abundance stems from still active geological heat beneath the crust. The central Idaho region sits on a geothermal hotspot that allows groundwater to circulate deep into the earth, heat up, and return as steamy mineral-rich springs. These springs vary in temperature, chemical makeup, and setting, making the state a living showcase of geothermal geography. 46. One of Idaho's valleys is actually a massive lava plain. The Snake River Plain, which stretches across the state's southern portion, is essentially a gigantic volcanic tract carved by millions of years of hotspot activity. Instead of a typical fertile valley formed by erosion, it's a broad arc of cooled lava flows, cinder cones, and basalt layers. The plain's evenness is deceiving. Beneath its surface lies one of North America's most complex volcanic histories. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and uncover the hidden stories and curiosities of each U.S. state that no one else will tell you. 45. Idaho contains a canyon deeper than the Grand Canyon. Hell's Canyon, sitting along the border of Idaho and Oregon, reaches depths of around 7,900 feet, deeper than the Grand Canyon's average depth. Its formation is tied to the Snake River, cutting through layers of basalt and sedimentary rock over millions of years. The dramatic elevation difference between river and rim has created a stunning vertical landscape. What makes this canyon even more fascinating is its mix of ecosystems, shifting from semi-arid slopes to forested ridges as the elevation changes. 44. The state's tallest peak is surrounded by a dramatic ring of mountains. Mount Bora rises to about 12,662 feet in the Lost River Range. What makes this peak particularly interesting is the surrounding geography: steep, narrow valleys, sharply uplifted ridges, and neighboring mountains that appear almost serrated when viewed from certain angles. Bora itself is part of an active fault block mountain system, and its region experienced a major earthquake in 1983 that physically raised the peak and altered nearby terrain. 43. Idaho has a desert that looks almost otherworldly. The Bruneau Sand Dunes, including one of the tallest single-structured sand dunes in North America, form a sandy bowl in the southwest portion of the state. These dunes rise up to around 470 feet, and their shape comes from steady wind patterns pushing fine sediment into a stable U-shaped formation. Unlike typical desert dune fields, these dunes sit surrounded by grasslands and volcanic features, creating a stark visual contrast. They provide an excellent case study in how wind can sculpt persistent landforms. 42. Idaho shares part of the largest inland waterway linked to the Pacific. The state's northern lakes and rivers connect into the Columbia River system, which ultimately flows to the Pacific Ocean. Through infrastructure like the lock system on the lower Snake River, located in Washington, cargo ships can reach Lewiston, Idaho, which is hundreds of miles inland. From a geographical standpoint, this makes Idaho one of the most unexpectedly maritime connected states in the interior West. It's a reminder of how river networks can act as long-distance transportation highways. 41. One Idaho lake is so clear, you can often see more than 30 feet down. Priest Lake, located in the state's far north, is known for its remarkable water clarity. The lake's purity comes from low nutrient levels, minimal sediment, and a largely undeveloped watershed. Surrounded by mountains, its position limits the amount of runoff that carries organic material into the water. As a result, sunlight penetrates deep beneath the surface. This clarity gives the lake a shimmering, jewel-like appearance that is scientifically tied to the lake's balanced ecological conditions. 40. Idaho's northern region lies at the same latitude as cities much further east. Northern Idaho sits around 48 degrees north latitude, roughly equal to places such as Montreal and parts of northern Europe. Geographically, this explains why the region experiences long summer days and short winter days. Yet the climate differs dramatically from those distant areas because of the mountains, regional air masses, and the Pacific Ocean's moderating influence. It's a rare combination of latitude and environment that shapes everything from vegetation patterns to seasonal moisture. 39. The Sawtooth Range forms one of the most photogenic mountain profiles in the lower 48. The Sawtooths are named for their jagged, pointed ridges that resemble the teeth of a saw. These formations come from uplift combined with extensive glacial carving, which sculpted sharp peaks and U-shaped valleys. The range contains more than 50 peaks above 10,000 feet, and each one contributes to a skyline dominated by angular rock. 38. Idaho holds the headwaters of the famous Salmon River. The Salmon River begins in the central Idaho mountains, fed by snowpack and natural springs. Geographically, the river is remarkable because it travels entirely within Idaho before eventually joining the Snake River. Its flow cuts through some of the most rugged terrain in the state, which is why it has earned the nickname, the River of No Return. The upper basin is an intricate network of 37. One Idaho region contains volcanic features that mimic the moon's surface. Craters of the Moon National Monument showcases volcanic cones, craters, and endless lava fields formed from eruptions over the past 15,000 years. The landscape includes rope-like lava formations, collapsed lava tubes, and cinder cones that rise like dark pyramids from the plain. 36. Idaho contains a mountain lake formed by a massive ancient landslide. Redfish Lake in the Sawtooth region owes its distinctive shape partly to glacial activity and partly to natural damming created by debris. Its long, narrow profile resulted from glacial carving, while its closed-off end formed when material blocked the lower valley thousands of years ago. Today, the lake sits in a perfectly framed basin beneath towering granite peaks. The combination of glacial geomorphology and landslide alteration makes Redfish Lake a particularly interesting geographical site. 35. The state's panhandle exists because of unique mountain and river constraints. Idaho's narrow northern corridor, often called the Panhandle, is a result of historical borders shaped by mountain ranges, river drainages, and territorial decisions influenced by the terrain. The Bitterroot Range on one side and the river systems on the other created natural boundaries that left Idaho with a slender north-south strip. This narrow connection creates sharp environmental contrasts across short distances, from dense forests to lakeside communities, all compressed into a compact geographical passage. 34. Idaho's lakes were greatly shaped by ancient ice. Many of Idaho's northern lakes, including Pandorale, Coeur d'Alene, and Priest Lake, were formed or altered by massive ice sheets thousands of years ago. While we're avoiding historical references in terms of events, the geographical processes themselves remain essential. Enormous glaciers once carved deep depressions and scoured valley floors, leaving behind basins that filled with meltwater. These basins became the modern lakes we see today. 33. The Bitterroot Range forms a sharp boundary on Idaho's western edge. On the border with Montana, the Bitterroot Range stands as a dramatic example of fault block mountains. These ridges rise steeply from lower ground, creating sudden elevation changes that shape weather patterns, wildlife movement, and even transportation corridors. The mountains run in a generally north-south direction, creating a natural spine that divides ecosystems on either side. Moisture from the Pacific is frequently forced upward by these mountains, producing heavier precipitation on Idaho's side compared to drier areas across the border. The ruggedness of this range is so pronounced that it influences settlement patterns, with towns clustering in valley bottoms while the upper slopes remain largely undeveloped and wild. 32. Idaho has a volcanic rift zone that cuts across its center. The Great Rift, located in the Snake River Plain, is a fissure system extending for more than 60 miles. This geographical feature is responsible for many of the state's volcanic structures, including cinder cones and lava flows. Unlike explosive eruptions, the Great Rift produced rivers of molten rock that spread across the landscape. The fractures in the ground remain visible today, forming linear cracks, deep crevices, and even collapsed tubes. What makes this rift particularly notable is its scale and youthful appearance. Geologically speaking, many of the formations look as though they cooled only a short time ago. 31. Idaho's largest reservoir stretches through a network of mountain valleys. Dworshak Reservoir, located in the north-central part of the state, extends for more than 50 miles along the Clearwater River drainage. Its geography is defined by steep canyon walls and narrow river channels that fill with water to create a long, winding waterway. The surrounding terrain is heavily forested, and the reservoir's shape reflects the tight topography of the river's original path. Because of its position within a deep canyon system, the water reaches significant depths. This reservoir provides a useful example of how rugged terrain can create long, narrow artificial lakes rather than wide-open basins. 30. Idaho has forests, with some of the tallest trees in the inland west. Certain stands of western red cedar in northern Idaho reach exceptional heights, sometimes surpassing 150 feet. These forests exist because of unique environmental conditions, steady moisture from Pacific air masses, deep soils, and valleys that trap humidity. Although Idaho is often imagined as semi-arid or mountainous, these northern pockets defy expectations. The presence of massive cedars and hemlocks demonstrates how changes in elevation, airflow, and soil type can create drastically different environments within relatively short distances. 29. Idaho's boundary with Nevada and Utah aligns with nearly perfect geometric precision. The southern border of Idaho is a nearly straight line running along the 42-degree north latitude. Unlike irregular boundaries shaped by rivers or mountains, this line is the result of survey-based decisions that use latitude as a reference point. This gives Idaho one of the most geometrically clean state borders in the American West. The result is a sharp visual contrast when compared to naturally defined borders elsewhere. The land itself varies greatly. High desert landscapes, sagebrush plains, and isolated mountain ranges all touch this straight line boundary. Its simplicity is striking when you remember how complex the surrounding topography actually is. 28. Idaho's lowest point is at a river crossing less dramatic than people expect. The state's lowest elevation lies where the Snake River exits Idaho into Washington at roughly 710 feet above sea level. For a state known for tall mountains, plunging canyons, and deep lakes, the lowest point is surprisingly modest. What makes it interesting is how quickly elevation rises as you travel east or south. Idaho is essentially a stair-step landscape, climbing from its lowest point near the Washington border toward towering central ranges. The sharp gradient in elevation over a relatively short horizontal distance demonstrates how compressed Idaho's terrain can be. 27. Idaho's highest town sits in a high alpine basin. The community of Stanley, which often ranks as Idaho's highest incorporated town, sits at more than 6,200 feet above sea level. The town rests in a wide mountain basin bordered by the Sawtooth Range, White Cloud Mountains, and the Salmon River Mountains. This basin is interesting because it is flat enough to support settlement while being ringed by dramatic vertical features. Cold air frequently pools here, creating temperature extremes that are notable even by Rocky Mountain standards. The geography of the basin turns it into a cold sink, illustrating how elevation, terrain shape, and atmospheric flow interact. 26. Idaho contains a river bend that creates a natural amphitheater. Along the Salmon River, certain stretches form sweeping U-shaped bends framed by cliffs and steep slopes. These bends occur where the river encounters resistant rock that forces it to change direction. Over time, erosion carved deep curves that resemble natural amphitheaters. The surrounding canyon walls rise in tiers, amplifying sound and creating an enclosed feeling despite being outdoors. This type of geographical formation highlights how rivers respond to changes in rock hardness, fracturing patterns, and valley constraints. 25. Idaho has a unique lake with no natural outlet. Henry's Lake in the eastern part of the state is a shallow, high elevation elevation lake that drains only through a controlled outlet rather than a fully natural one. The geography of the basin traps water, making the lake unusually stable despite seasonal changes. The broad, flat basin floor combined with small inflow streams creates a delicate balance between evaporation, inflow, and water level management. This type of lake is relatively rare in the interior west, especially at such high altitude. 24. Idaho's plateaus transition abruptly into deep river valleys. In central and western Idaho, high plateaus often end suddenly where rivers have carved deep canyons. This creates dramatic relief with flat or gently rolling terrain, giving way to steep descents. The Clearwater Plateau and the Camas Prairie are prime examples. From a geographical point of view, this transition reflects different stages of erosion. Rivers cut downward faster than the surrounding land uplifts or wears away. The resulting combination of horizontal and vertical features makes the landscape particularly complex and visually striking. 23. Idaho contains a lake divided by natural sills into distinct basins. Lake Coeur d'Alene is segmented by underwater ridges or sills that create multiple basins of varying depth. These sills were shaped by past sediment deposition and glacial movement. As a result, different parts of the lake have slightly different temperatures, clarity levels, and ecological conditions. The geography of the lake bed is more complex than the surface suggests. Understanding these underwater features helps explain why some sections of the lake freeze later in winter or warm earlier in summer. 22. Idaho's Salmon River Mountains form an enormous, rugged block of terrain. This central mountain group covers a vast area and includes countless subranges, high basins, and deep river gorges. Unlike some regions where mountains form in neat, identifiable chains, the Salmon River Mountains spread irregularly, creating a massive, contorted block of elevated land. Their complexity arises from multiple geological processes working simultaneously: uplift, river erosion, and glacial carving. The result is a labyrinth of ridges and valleys where elevation often shifts sharply over short distances. This ruggedness contributes to Idaho's reputation as one of the least accessible mountainous landscapes in the contiguous United States. 21. Idaho has a waterfall that outflows more water than Niagara at certain times of year. Shoshone Falls, often called the Niagara of the West, can exceed Niagara Falls in water volume during peak runoff. Its height reaches roughly 212 feet, taller than Niagara's vertical drop. The falls sit on the Snake River, where layered basalt has created a multi-tiered descent. The wide, horseshoe-shaped curtain of water expands dramatically in spring when snowmelt swells the river. The surrounding canyon constrains the flow, increasing the fall's intensity. This geological relationship between river flow, rock type, and canyon shape makes Shoshone Falls one of Idaho's most powerful natural features. 20. Idaho's basalt cliffs reveal layer after layer of lava flow. In many parts of southern Idaho, canyon walls expose stacked basalt layers that look almost like geological cake slices. Each layer represents a separate volcanic event where lava spread across the plain and cooled. Over time, rivers such as the Snake carve downward through the basalt, revealing the sequence of flows. This exposed rock record is unusually visible because of the canyon's depth and the durability of basalt. These cliffs allow researchers and observers to trace the volcanic history of the region without needing to excavate. 19. Idaho contains a spring system that feeds an entire river section. In the Thousand Springs region near Hagerman, groundwater emerges from canyon walls in massive volumes. This water originates from snowmelt in distant mountains that percolates through porous volcanic rock for miles before resurfacing. The springs form waterfalls, streams, and pools that flow directly into the Snake River. The geographical setup is fascinating because it demonstrates how underground hydrology can create surface features far from the original source. It's one of the clearest examples of large-scale aquifer discharge in the West. 18. Idaho has a mountain pass that acts as a major weather divider. Lookout Pass in the northern panhandle sits on the border with Montana and functions as a significant geographic threshold. Moist air flowing eastward cools and drops precipitation on the Idaho side, while drier conditions often appear immediately beyond the pass. This transition is visible in vegetation, snow depth, and even road conditions. The pass is situated at an elevation that places it directly in the path of moisture-bearing air masses, making it a textbook case of orographic influence. 17. Idaho's alpine lakes form dense clusters high in the central mountains. Many of Idaho's Idaho's highest mountain regions contain tight clusters of small alpine lakes, often numbering in the dozens within a single basin system. These lakes form where bedrock depressions collect snowmelt and rainfall. Because the central mountains consist of rugged granitic terrain, the basins tend to be steep-sided and bowl-shaped, producing countless miniature lakes perched above treeline. Their distribution says a lot about Idaho's elevation profile. The state's interior is so heavily uplifted that entire networks of high-altitude basins exist above 8,000 feet. 16. Idaho's Snake River Plain acts as a natural weather corridor. Stretching in a broad arc across southern Idaho, the Snake River Plain funnels air masses between the Pacific Northwest and the central interior of the continent. Its long, open shape guides winds more consistently than surrounding mountain regions. Moisture-bearing systems often travel along this corridor, dropping rain or snow where the plain bends or narrows. The edges of the plain form transitional zones where grassland meets lava fields and farmland borders basalt cliffs. Because the plain is lower and flatter than its surroundings, it influences cloud movement, storm direction, and even temperature moderation in several towns. This corridor effect makes the Snake River Plain a subtle but powerful driver of Idaho's weather patterns. 15. Idaho has a rare desert of silica-rich sand. The Bruneau sand dunes, centered around towering hills of fine, uniform sand, are an unusual feature because their grains are primarily composed of quartz rather than volcanic material. Many western dune fields originate from pulverized volcanic rock, but this one comes from weathered, transported sediment that accumulated in a natural basin. The dunes rise from a relatively flat desert plain, creating towering shapes that stand out sharply against the sagebrush landscape. Their formation required a combination of steady winds, a contained basin, and a long-term supply of fine sediment. 14. Idaho's northern extension creates an unexpected climate contrast. The narrow northern panhandle extends far enough upward that it aligns more with the climates of inland maritime regions than with the semi-arid landscapes of southern Idaho. This creates a dramatic contrast in vegetation, precipitation, and seasonal conditions. While southern Idaho often experiences dry summers and larger temperature swings, the northern area receives much more moisture and supports dense forests. The panhandle's shape funnels air from the Pacific, increasing cloud cover and rainfall levels. This contrast highlights how a relatively small geographic extension can dramatically shift environmental conditions. 13. Idaho contains a river that changes direction multiple times across tight canyons. The middle fork of the Salmon River flows through a complex series of twists where steep canyon walls force the river to bend sharply, sometimes doubling back on itself. These changes in direction occur because the river navigates varying rock types, fault lines, and uplift patterns. Instead of flowing in a straight path to lower elevations, the river repeatedly weaves through narrow passages created by resistant bedrock. The result is a landscape where the river seems to move in unpredictable patterns, illustrating how topography dictates water flow in mountainous regions. 12. Idaho's Owyhee Canyonlands form a network of deep, narrow gorges. In the southwestern part of the state, the Owyhee region contains hundreds of miles of volcanic plateaus that break abruptly into vertical walled canyons. Many of these gorges are surprisingly narrow given their depth, creating dramatic slot-like passages carved by persistent river erosion. The landscape includes mesa-like formations, isolated buttes, and cliffs that drop suddenly into winding river channels. Because the volcanic rock erodes in specific patterns, the canyon walls often appear smooth, layered, or columned. This region is one of Idaho's most remote geographical areas, with terrain that can change from open sagebrush plains to 1,000-foot canyon drops in a matter of steps. 11. Idaho contains one of the largest intact wilderness regions in the lower 48. The Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness spans an enormous block of central Idaho, forming a continuous zone of rugged mountains, deep valleys, and sparsely developed land. The geography of this region is defined by steep relief and highly varied terrain. High plateaus border sharp river gorges, and massive ridgelines divide remote basins. What makes this area geographically significant is the near absence of major roads across such a large section of the state. Its terrain is so rugged that natural barriers dictate movement far more than infrastructure. Before we get to the 10 facts that corroborate what I told you at the beginning, remember to subscribe to the channel and give it a like to become experts in American geography. 10. Idaho's largest island sits quietly inside a mountain lake. Kalispell Island, located in Priest Lake, stands as Idaho's largest island within a freshwater lake. The island's size surprises many visitors because it supports dense forest, modest elevation changes, and a defined shoreline with coves and points. The island exists because of glacial processes that shaped Priest Lake's basin, leaving behind elevated ridges that later became isolated by rising water. Its presence demonstrates how lake basins can contain complex features below and above the water's surface. 9. Idaho has a valley floor dominated by volcanic domes. The Arco Big Southern Butte region showcases several large volcanic domes rising from an otherwise open plain. Big Southern Butte, in particular, stands more than 2,000 feet above the surrounding terrain, making it one of the tallest standalone volcanic domes in the world. These domes formed when thick, silica-rich magma pushed upward but cooled before it could erupt explosively. Their rounded shapes contrast sharply with the flatness of the Snake River plain. This creates a striking visual effect where enormous geological masses appear to have risen from nowhere. 8. Idaho contains a river with one of the longest continuous whitewater stretches in the country. The Salmon River flows for more than 400 miles across Idaho, maintaining a naturally free-flowing character along most of its length. Its steep gradients, canyon restrictions, and consistent water volume create a nearly uninterrupted stretch of rapids and swift water. Geographically, this continuous whitewater occurs because the river cuts through some of the most uplifted terrain in the state, dropping elevation rapidly over long distances. Even where the river widens, its gradient remains sufficiently steep to maintain fast-flowing conditions. 7. Idaho's mountain basins often sit at surprisingly high elevations. Many basins across central and southern Idaho appear flat or gently rolling, but their elevation can exceed 5,000 to 6,000 feet. These basins form through a combination of uplift, volcanic activity, and sediment accumulation. Their high altitude contributes to cooler temperatures, longer winters, and distinct vegetation patterns. Because the basins are surrounded by higher mountains, they collect cold air at night, creating pronounced temperature swings. This geographical setup explains why some desert-like areas of Idaho can also experience severe winter cold. 6. Idaho's deepest cave reaches far below the surface. Idaho's deepest known cave systems extend more than 600 feet underground. These caves formed in lava tubes and fractured basalt created when molten rock cooled unevenly. Over time, water flowed through the cracks, enlarging passages and forming chambers. The combination of volcanic and erosional processes makes Idaho's underground geography particularly varied compared to regions dominated by limestone caves. These deep cave structures hint at the complexity hidden beneath the Snake River plain. 5. Idaho contains an isolated mountain range surrounded almost entirely by lava. The Big Southern Butte area includes a set of volcanic domes ringed by lava flows that stretch for miles. In this region, mountains rise directly out of basalt fields rather than sedimentary foothills. This creates the sensation of peaks erupting from a black rock ocean. Because the surrounding lava has so few soil-forming materials, vegetation patterns change dramatically at the boundary between the lava and the domes. It's a clear demonstration of how geology can determine ecology with abrupt transitions. For Idaho's largest river tributary network spreads across wild terrain. The Clearwater River system, one of the major tributary networks in the Pacific Northwest interior, drains a vast area of central and northern Idaho. Its branches cut through rugged canyons, timbered slopes, and steep ridgelines. Each tributary carries snowmelt from high mountain basins, merging into a system that funnels enormous volumes of water westward. The geography is distinctive because the river cuts through both volcanic and granitic terrains, creating varied canyon styles and sediment patterns. 3. Idaho's tallest peak rises from a high elevation valley system. Mount Bora, Idaho's highest point at over 12,600 feet, stands along the Lost River Range, a line of sharply uplifted fault block mountains. The mountain rises abruptly from the surrounding Lost River Valley, where the terrain is already more than a mile above sea level. This creates extreme relief over short distances. The mountain's steep faces and narrow ridgelines result from tectonic uplift combined with erosion that exposes angled layers of rock. 2. Idaho has a lake with an extremely complex underwater underwater terrain. Pend Oreille, one of the deepest lakes in the United States, contains underwater ridges, trenches, and shelves that create a highly irregular lake bed. Some sections drop steeply only a short distance from shore, while others form broad underwater plateaus. This complexity stems from both glacial carving and tectonic activity that shape the basin. The variation in depth influences water temperature layers, circulation patterns, and even fish distribution. 1. Idaho contains one of the largest high-elevation plains in the interior northwest. The Camas Prairie spreads across a broad plateau formed by volcanic deposits and long-term sediment buildup. Its elevation creates a cool, open landscape with rolling fields bordered by distant mountains. Unlike typical lowland prairies, this one exists at significant altitude, creating a blend of grassland species adapted to colder conditions. The flatness of the prairie contrasts with Idaho's dramatic mountains, demonstrating the surprising range of topographical forms packed into a single state. Now that you know these 50 facts about Idaho, tell us, which one did you like the most, or which one surprised you the most? We'd love to read your opinion in the comments and see how many of us picked the same number. And something else many of us will probably agree on is watching the video I'm leaving on screen, because we all love sharing and learning interesting facts. And that's exactly what this video is all about. But before you watch it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Otherwise, we might not see each other again.